Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, it looks like Clara joined us.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to call this meeting to order. What is it, around 6:34, something like that? Please take the roll.
Thank you. We have President Alvarado.
Yes.
Thank you, Vice President Sutter.
Hello.
Thank you, Director Weiner.
Present.
Thank you, Director Stanley.
Yes.
Thank you, and Director Cepeda.
Here.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have a quorum.
Okay, next item, please.
Next item is Pledge of Allegiance or observation of moment of silence.
Okay, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Next item, please.
Next item is approval of the agenda. Any member of the board may request an agenda item be postponed, removed, or heard out of order.
Okay, what is the will of the body?
I would like to make a small correction, and I'm not sure that I need to pull an item from the consent calendar. I would need a judgment on that, President Alvarado.
Okay, well, let's ask Claire. Claire, can you answer this question?
I'm sorry, I was muted. I'm sorry, Director Weiner, could you describe the change or the question you had on the consent calendar item, please?
It was a misspelling of a name within the minutes.
Oh, we can correct a name within the minutes, of course.
Okay.
And then
so,
we could, if you would like to describe that change, and then with that change, if someone could make a motion.
okay. Quality and Resource Recovery Department Manager Weiner is spelled W-I-N-E-R. His last name is the same as mine within the minutes. And that's in 10/21/2020.
Could you direct us to the page of the packet, Director Weiner, so we can...
I didn't write that down, but it's
Oh, okay.
on the minutes of 10/21/2020.
All right, we can absolutely make that change. And if there's no other changes, then they could be adopted as amended by your request.
Okay, thank you. Well, I move we accept the minutes. We accept the consent. Oh, no, we're not there yet. Yeah, no action at this point. I move the calendar, the agenda as is.
I'll second.
Thank you. I'll do roll call. President Alvarado.
I believe we lost him.
Okay, so we'll move on to Vice President Sutter.
Yes, and just for the record, it's on page 13 that Director Weiner was referring to.
Okay, thank you. Director Weiner?
Yes.
Thank you, Director Stanley.
Yes.
Thank you, Director Cepeda.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll go back to President Alvarado. Do we have him in the room yet? Okay, thank you. Item number 2 is approved as amended. Vice President Tibbetts, can we continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, so next item is agenda item 3, public comment items not on the agenda. Madam Vice President, the district has not received any written or oral communication or requests to comment.
Do we have any public comment, any public available? Are they in attendance here?
No, we do not.
Okay, we can move on.
Thank you. Next item is the consent calendar. It's item 4A, and that is approve the regular board meeting minutes of October 7th, 2020, October 21st, 2020, and the special board meeting minutes of October 7th, 2020.
And I noticed President Alvarado has returned.
Yes, I think I fixed my internet problem. I think it's my home internet connection, so I had to hook up to my mobile. So let's continue. Where were we?
The consent calendar, sir.
Okay. All right, so do we read 4A?
Yes.
And were Harry's corrections done?
Yes,
Okay. So we need a motion to approve then?
it's all done. She just needs your vote for the record.
Okay,
I'm
yes.
sorry.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. I just want to correct the record. I'm sorry. The vote that we held before that's already been cleared was the vote for approval of the agenda item number 2. We also determined there were no public comments in item number 3, but on item number 4, we were still waiting, I believe, for a motion to approve item 4A with the correction that Director Weiner had requested.
Okay, so can we get that motion?
I move. I still move.
Okay. In a second?
I'll second the motion.
Thank you. So we'll start with President Alvarado,
Yes.
Vice President Pettit,
Yes,
Director Weiner,
Yes.
Director Stanley.
Yes.
Thank you, and Director Cepeda.
Yes.
Thank you. The consent calendar is approved.
Okay, next item, please.
Next item is action calendar. Item A, adopt an amended fiscal year 2021 position control list. No
Okay.
public comments were received on this item, Mr. President.
Say again, I'm sorry?
And no public comment was received for this item.
Okay, very good. Who's going to give us a report on this?
So Justin's going to give a brief report on this item.
Okay. Justin?
Yep. Good evening,
Good evening.
President Alvarado, Vice President Sudeth, and Board of Directors. I'm Justin Lovell, Administrative Services Department Manager. So tonight I want to present briefly some modifications we'd like to make to the position control list. So they're within 2 sections. One is in the Administrative Services Department. Within Administrative Services, I have, since I've started, I've had a study done with a consultant come in and look at how the organization is, the organizational structure of the Administrative Services Department. And I've been, over the last several months, been implementing several of those changes. And one of the changes, we're looking specifically at the organization of the finance division within the department. And so tonight I'm recommending to add an accountant position and then remove an accounting technician position within the finance department. So the finance division will have 3 positions: a finance supervisor, accountant, and accounting technician. And then also there was a authorized position for accounting for an administrative technician, which is no longer needed for the department. So we'll be asking to reduce that. And then the other changes that we're requesting are related to the Water Quality and Resource Recovery Department. We're essentially switching some positions around from the operations division, taking one allocation that is towards a shift supervisor and the lead operator position and moving that FTE count to an additional senior maintenance worker. And we are also asking to add the allocation for an additional maintenance worker. So we've, as Aaron Weiner has been looking at his structure within his department, he found that he does need additional FTEs with the maintenance division. So it's been very critical for him to make sure that he has sufficient people to continue the operation, the maintenance of the plant, and then he has sufficient operators based on the current amended FTE count. So that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about the recommended changes.
And I did just want to add one item, Justin, before you take questions, that the position changes that are on this item, none of these are new classifications. These are all existing classifications. As Justin said, it's a realignment as we continue to look at our organizational structure. You've seen a few of these come forward. I think most recently there was one put forward in the Infrastructure and Planning Department, and I anticipate that we will have a few more of these changes coming forward to the board within the next few months as we continue to formalize the organizational structure based on the current needs and future needs of the district. So I just wanted to emphasize those additional points.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Justin. Let's start with Director Cepeda. Questions, comments?
Just, Justin, would you mind confirming the FTE, is it full-time equivalent or full-time employee?
We're classifying as full-time equivalent. We don't have kind of half positions. So essentially when we say one, it would refer to one person. So it's kind of a one-for-one, but it is typically as a full-time equivalent position.
Perfect. Thank you for that. That's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Cepeda. Director Weiner, questions, comments? I believe you're on mute.
What is the significance of the position control list? What is the function organizationally of that item?
So that is essentially what the board is authorizing, how many employees we can hire within the organization. And so it's, it helps us also establish our budget every fiscal year, establishing how many positions we are authorized to hire. And so this is kind of a key component of board action, just to say how many, what's our organizational needs to maintain the operations of the organization.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Weiner. Director Stanley, questions, comments?
Yes, please. Justin, I'm one of those kind of learners who have to see things visually and touch it. I forget what it's called, but it would be helpful for me if in the future when we're talking about staff positions, if you could include a chart showing who's who in the zoo, so that at least for me, I can see what we're talking about. So right now, just so I can, since I kind of have it sketched out here on a piece of scratch paper, the gentleman who has an office directly across from you, his first name is what?
That is Dean. He's the finance supervisor.
He's the finance supervisor. So
correct.
He is going to do less accounting and more supervising. Is that correct?
That is correct. We want to put more accounting work onto essentially a line level staff.
Okay, and then we have one other employee named Kyle, and what does he do?
He is an accounting technician.
And so is his position remaining, or is he doing something else now?
He is remaining. He will stay in the same position.
Okay, and then we have a temporary employee, and that's all I know that was still left in the accounting staff. Is there any more that I'm missing?
That is it. Those are the three positions.
Okay, so what you're proposing is that the temporary employee is no longer going to be with us. Dean and Kyle stay, and you're going to add how many people?
One person. So essentially it's hiring a full-time position to replace the temporary position.
Okay, and okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Stanley. Vice President Sutter, questions, comments?
No. Thank you.
Thank you. And I have no questions or comments either. Can I get a motion to approve this item?
I so move.
Okay, the item's been moved. Who's going to second? Can I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, the item's been moved and seconded. Please, roll call.
Thank you. President Alvarado?
Yes.
Vice President Sutter?
Yes.
Director Weiner?
Yes.
Director Stanley?
Yes.
And Director Cepeda?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, thank you. Next item, please.
Okay, next item. Next item we have is 5B, authorize the general manager to increase the purchase order with accounting principles for an additional $85,000, revising the not to exceed amount to $135,000 for temporary staffing assistance for fiscal year 2021.
Okay, who are we gonna hear from on this?
Justin.
All right, Justin.
Good evening again. So I just want to present this item. This is related to the previous item on the position control list. We have a temporary employee. The general manager has authorization to spend up to $50,000 per vendor per fiscal year. And for our firm, that accounting principles, that we have hired the temporary accounting technician, we are approaching the spending limit. And so we know we're going to need the temp position for several more months while we recruit for a full-time accountant. And so the temporary position is critical for the operations of the finance division. This position issues a lot of our vendor checks and make sure that our accounts payable and accounts receivable functions are running smoothly. So we need to continue a temp position until we're able to hire an accountant. And so this action would give us sufficient spending authority to get us through the end of the fiscal year. But I do hope that we will have an accountant within the next 4 months or so.
Okay.
That is all I have. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, let's start this time with Director Weiner. Questions, comments?
I have no comments. I support this item.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Director Weiner. Director Cepeda, questions, comments? You're on mute, Director Cepeda.
Yeah.
There you go.
So a couple of questions on the background report here. One of the topics here says they'll be working with ADP. How much longer do we have until the full implementation of ADP is done?
Yeah, we're getting very close. We've definitely run into some setup issues. It's taken longer than anticipated. We are hoping our target date to go live for payroll for staff is January 8th, and then board members would be shortly after that.
Perfect. And then, so you're saying to hire a full-time position person, it will take about 4 months. Are we just giving a little extra for wiggle room there? Is that what that additional $85,000 is for?
Yes, yeah, that will give us additional wiggle room. I'm hoping within 4 months, but depending on the candidate pool and how quickly we can get out for the recruitment, I do want to make sure that we're able to cover the operational needs of the division through the end of the fiscal year.
And that person that's been in there, how long have we had that person in there that they've almost eaten up the 50,000?
Well, that person, since the 50,000 has been since July 1st. This particular person has been working with the temp agency with us for a little over, I believe, about 1.5 years now.
So from July 1st to about the end of December, we're going to spend 50,000?
That's correct. It'll be a little bit before the end of December.
So, because I was just trying to do the math. So if it's 50,000 for 6 months, and now we're going to do 85 for another 6 months, roughly?
It will. It's getting us where we're kind of. It might be closer. We're the 50,000 is going to be closer to November, so it's going to be more. It's more realistically about 7 months of time, and that gives us a little bit of buffer in case a person may work some more hours than anticipated.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. No more questions. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you, Director Cepeda. Director Stanley, questions, comments?
Well, I'm sort of piggybacking on Director Cepeda. I recall when we had this almost identical discussion before about extending the authority of the general manager to extend this contract. And at that time, we were told it should only be a little bit more time. Thus, we only need enough, no, it shouldn't exceed $50,000 because we should have all this all taken care of. And now now we're being asked for another 85,000 because it hasn't been taken care of, and you just admitted that it might take 7 months. So I would like a little bit more fleshed out explanation as to what's happening, that that we're being asked for a lot more money than we keep coming back and asking us for more money, and we're not filling positions, and I'm confused, and I really hate it when this happens. So could you explain a little bit more what some of the roadblocks have been?
Sure. I mean, there's been, several things that I've been taking my time of examining the organizational structure of the department. I want to make sure I have the right positions in the right places. And so that is one area that's taken a while. I want to make sure that we're going to function the way that will work in the long term. So that's where the previous item of adding an accountant, the previous assumption is that we would hire an accounting technician too. And so I decided that wasn't the direction I wanted to move the department, that I'm going to be much better to have an accountant position filling that space. So that's part of it. And then the other part is, it's taken longer to implement ADP. ADP will take off a significant load of the existing accounting technicians' workload from payroll. That will, since ADP will be doing the payroll processing itself. And so once ADP is live, then that workload, that bandwidth, will be able to be shifted between the positions. And so it's just several factors of taking time and making sure that we get it right before we're moving forward. Now that the board just authorized the previous position, that we are going to be able to hire for the position that I need for the division.
Well, it all sounds really reasonable, Justin, and I thank you for explaining more fully so I understand. A small follow-up, however, how much, I'm not familiar with the using full-time equivalents and stuff like that, but I get the concept. So how much of our employee time will be spent doing whatever needs to be done to provide information to ADP?
The person, it would be approximately, if you're thinking 20%, 15 to 20% of their time would be spent related to verification of hours and getting the information to ADP on a biweekly basis, which is a comparison of currently it's essentially 100% of their time.
And so that person's position is going to be called what?
So that is still existing. That's the accounting technician. That is still going to exist. We'll be taking some of the duties that are currently done by the temporary accounting technician, would be shifting over to the existing accounting technician. Duties that the finance supervisor is currently doing, that's accountant related, is going to go to the accountant position. And then the finance supervisor is going to be overseeing the whole range of finance, which is accounting, budget, treasury management, our bank management, as well as reporting and any other financial oversight.
Okay. Well, thank you for that explanation. I appreciate it.
All right, thank you, Director Stanley. Vice President Sutter, questions, comments?
No, thank you.
Thank you. I have no questions and no comments either, so can I have a motion to approve this item?
I so move.
Okay, the item's been moved.
Second that.
All right, that has been moved and seconded. Roll call, please.
Thank you, President Alvarado.
Yes.
Vice President Sutter. Sorry, Vice President Sutter, you were muted. Thank you. Director Weiner?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Stanley?
Sorry, you caught me mid-yawn. Yes.
Thank you. And Director Cepeda?
Yes.
Thank you. Item 5B is, the motion passes 5-0.
Okay, next item, please.
Next item is item 5C, and that is ratify the Deputy General Manager's execution of an application to the California Governor's Office of Emergency Services for a grant in the amount of $300,000 for emergency electrical generators for the West County Wastewater District Wastewater System Electrical Power Resiliency Project.
Okay, I assume we're going to hear from Andrew on this.
I
I'm not
can
sure.
certain
Go ahead.
if you request a presentation, I'd be happy to do one. The quick version is there was an opportunity, and on very short notice, we turned it around. We requested $300,000 in funds to help us with a continuity plan and buy some emergency generators so that we're better prepared to deal with power emergency, shutdowns, whether it be earthquake or a planned power shutdown. We'd requested this this grant. I signed off on it. President Alvarado was fully aware of it. And the OES, the grant requirements did say that we had to have board authority, but it just needed to be audited, and something that in case we were audited, I should say, that we could demonstrate that we had that board authority. So this is confirming that I had permission to apply for these funds from the state of California.
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Lisa, anything to add?
Nothing else. Thank
Okay,
you.
thank you. I think the board will go touch on questions or comments in the next section, Andrew. So I think that presentation was fine for now, but let's get the board input. Director Stanley, questions, comments?
Yes. Andrew, bravo for you, dude. I'm so glad that you followed up on this, and I just want to make a note for the record that if we were to get this $300,000 combined with the other 600 and some thousand grant, the staff has helped bring in almost $1 million of free money to this district for projects that we want to do, and good on all of us. So there you go. Thank you, Andrew.
Anything further, Director Stanley?
Yes, thank you.
Are you all set?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Director Weiner, questions, comments?
No, good job. Glad that we could make the turnaround and apply for some needed resource, and also that will add to our emergency preparedness. Is there some guesstimation about how many people are applying versus how many grants are being allocated?
There was $20 million available statewide for the sanitary agencies to specifically apply for these grants. The maximum amount that could be applied for was $300,000. So, I'm hopeful we'll get $300,000. I think we have a strong application. It was clearly directly addressed the requirements of the grant. So we may not get $300,000, but I think we will receive a grant. I have no idea how many other agencies apply, but based on the amount of money California-wide, I would expect we would get something less than the $300,000 that we asked for, but that we would get a grant. But of course, until they decide that, I really don't know.
Well, I'll make a motion that we all cross our fingers.
It's probably a good motion. Thank you, Director Weiner. Director Cepeda?
Yeah, I'll start off with echoing the other two directors' sentiments. Andrew, thank you and the team for going after this money and getting us some free money there and looking out for the agency. My question is, once we get the $300,000, and again, crossing our fingers, or regardless of the amount that we get, can we have an electric truck? I know that we have on there a Ford F-350 They would be making some of those electric going forward, and that would put us both in line with the new ban on gas cars that the governor signed, and also it would align with the goals of the agency. So I don't know if we're able to do that. We don't have to. I don't know if you have to put that in the request or not, but it would be great to have that so we can start aligning with that. And also my other ask would be if we can make sure that we let the local Ford dealership know about the bid once we go out to buy it, see if they can give us a competitive bid as well so we can try to keep the money local.
The first piece, the electric truck, we did not put an electric truck into this particular grant application. It is possible it could be modified. It's a lot more expensive. But in the long run, we are going to be evaluating the entire fleet and taking a look at ways to electrify the fleet in the future. So that's not lost on us at all. And the request about making the opportunity available to the local Ford dealer, we'll also take a look at that. We frequently buy off of the state list, which gives us the best value and the best prices, but we can also take a look at perhaps doing that as well, putting the state list and putting it out and requesting and say, hey, we can get it for this much. Can you match it or do better? But I'll work with Justin on the specific rules around that. But yeah,
Great,
certainly.
thank you. Thank you for that, Andrew.
Thank you, Director Cepeda. Thank you, Andrew. Vice President Sutter.
Thank you.
Set.
Thank you, and the grant. I appreciate you guys going after it, as well as I think you went after the other one too, right? There were two of them that CSDA put out.
This is the only one that we were able to apply for.
Okay, I know there was another one too. Just one correction. I believe that grant is for all special districts because it's an infrastructure grant.
That's true.
Right?
That's true. I just said sanitary, but it's all special districts, so it's even a broader pool.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, it's all special districts. So the pot of money is going to go to all special districts, just so everybody knows. The only thing I will say, just Director Zepeda, just so you know, remember the procurement rules. So even though we can reach out to our local Ford dealer, we do need to make sure that it's open and fair competition. So if we do, even though we can buy something from the schedule that our deputy manager mentioned, procurement rules are that we do need to make sure that we make it open, fair competition to not just a Ford dealer, but all of our dealers in our local area. So we want to be careful with that kind of procurement, especially that level of spend. So I would say reach out to all of the dealers in the area and give them a chance to bid on this type of fleet purchase, even if it's 1 or 3 cars. It's a good idea. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice President Sutter. I too echo the other board members' sentiments. I think this is a good move for us to apply for this money. It's there, it's available. And Andrew and I did discuss this prior to them going forward. So hopefully let's keep our fingers and toes crossed and we'll get the money. It's always nice to get free money from the state when we can. We could certainly use the money. So having said that, can I get a motion to approve this item?
May I add one last thing, President Alvarado?
Sure. Go right ahead.
I appreciate the thanks that was given to me, but I just want to make sure I acknowledge that this was a whole team effort, that a lot of people stepped up and took some quick action, and Aaron is the one who took the lead on making sure we got this done on time.
Great. Thanks for that, Andrew, and thank you, Aaron, as well, and all the staff that worked on this. Absolutely. So having said that, motion to approve this item, please.
Move it.
Right, item's been moved. Get a second.
A second.
All right, item's been moved and seconded. Please take the roll.
Thank you, President Alvarado.
Yes.
Vice President Suddeth,
Yes.
Director Weiner,
Yes.
Director Stanley,
Yep.
and Director Cepeda.
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, next item, please.
Next item is action item 5D, adopt a resolution establishing a revised schedule for board meetings and election officers and rescinding resolution 2019-45.
Okay, I think I'm gonna ask our general counsel to give us a little spiel on this. You're muted.
I'm
Okay,
sorry. Thank you. Hopefully the general manager will help me out a bit on this as well. This is an
absolutely.
issue that arose at the planning committee meeting a couple of weeks ago. Director Suddeth pointed out that on our existing schedule, we are not set to have a meeting in January until January 20th. As you may or may not be aware, January 20th will be the inauguration of, I think, the 46th President of the United States, barring any last minute legal changes. And therefore, and some people may be not available for the January 20th meeting. That's the context in which this originally arose in the planning committee. And then some other discussions were had in connection with the fact that the current meeting schedule only has one meeting for the first meeting in December and no second meeting in December, and one meeting, the second, what would normally be the second meeting in January. And so that I understand was historically provided in order to give somewhat of a recess at winter time. And there are valid reasons for that. And there may be other reasons, but I'm not aware of. However, one of the challenges that it poses is that at the end of the year, if there is business that needs to be conducted, certain business as a public agency cannot be conducted. You might say, for example, why not just hold a special meeting if we must conduct business? But there are certain types of business that cannot be conducted at a special meeting and that must be conducted at a regular meeting. These include things like adopting ordinances, certain types of financing mechanisms, and election of officers under your bylaws. So the proposal was put forth for your consideration to consider having, returning to 2 board meetings a month and merely canceling those meetings that are not needed. Because in that way, you will already have a regular meeting scheduled at which that type of business could be conducted. But if there's not a need for a meeting, then the meeting can be canceled. And that would allow for a regular setting of the time, but again, no requirement. So I put that out. I know there are other considerations for discussion, but at least I wanted to bring it up for discussion today. As the general manager mentioned in her email yesterday as well, no action has to be taken tonight, but at least this is an opportunity for us to discuss it. And the secondary issue, again, which can be decided at a later meeting, is when the election for officers would occur. Director Stanley raised with me separately that currently the only meeting in December is December 2nd. The election will not be certified until December 4th. If there's a swearing in, it would have to be done sometime after that. And then there's a pretty long time between that and the next meeting in January, and no opportunity potentially for a meeting involving a swearing in or any earlier election of officers. Currently, your board procedures provide for the election of officers in January, as we talked about before, and we could potentially consider changing that and having the election in December and someone taking office as president or vice president in January. So I'm putting that out on the table as it's described in the memo. And I'd like to actually, if I could, hand this back to the general manager because she also had some thoughts about this that weren't raised in the planning committee meeting.
Okay, thank you, Claire. Lisa?
Yeah, so the only other thing I wanted to add, which actually General Counsel just talked about briefly, is that we had historically recommended that the board adopt a schedule that it did include a recess, actually 2 of them throughout the year. I think what we're really talking about here, where some of the issues occur, is in the December-January schedule. I would like to recommend that even if the board does want to go back and adopt a schedule that includes 2 per meeting, that by practice, we could agree to have a recess in August. This year, unfortunately, we had to schedule a lot of special meetings because we had some circumstances that dictated that. But in general, it's really important that we have a break at some point. It is difficult for staff to kind of catch up, and that provides a bit of a break for us to not have board meetings for a brief period of time and catch up on some things. So I just wanted the board to also consider that as you're looking at this item. It doesn't, again, you can still adopt a schedule that includes the 2 board meetings per month. But, you know, by practice, and if we could sort of agree that in general, we'll try to avoid having the meetings in August as we kind of laid out originally. So that's all I wanted to add to that comment, or to that item. Thanks.
All right.
And I would just like to add to that it's not uncommon. There are many boards that I have worked with in which, even though there were regularly scheduled meetings throughout the year, that they took a recess in August. Or rescheduled some of their meetings in December to allow for holidays, travel, et cetera. So it's not uncommon, and it would not be out of the norm if that were the will of the board.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, thank you, Claire. Questions, comments? Let's start with Director Cepeda.
No questions at this time.
All right. Director Weiner, questions, comments?
Yeah, I'm all for the hiatus during the holidays in winter and in summer, taking a hiatus. And I haven't thought this through, but wouldn't it be possible to have a special schedule related to the holidays? In other words, the first Wednesday following the Christmas break, or the, you know, some language like that, where we tied the hiatus to the actual holidays that we're taking a break for, plus some time, wait until the holidays ended for the next meeting, and take some time before the holidays based on the dates of the holidays. So rather than saying hard and fast the first and third Wednesday of the month every month, we could make an exception for August and December and January, based on what days New Year's falls on and what days Christmas falls on, and so forth. Just throwing it out there for a way to get around the idea of having to cancel or change if we just tied it to the days, the first Wednesday following a particular holiday in that month.
May I respond to that? One way that one of my boards has done is that every year, sort of around October, that the board takes a look at the upcoming schedule, and they look at where the meetings fall in comparison to where Thanksgiving falls or the December holidays fall, and they will make a motion at an October meeting to reset the November and December meetings and adjourn them to a different date. I think that's doable on a year-to-year basis in order to, to deal with those, because they do change every year. And also because I think, as we've seen over time, the types and durations of holidays that are observed by different boards may change.
Okay, thanks for that comment.
It's worth having some flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. Director Weiner, are you all set?
Yes, no, yeah, I was just throwing out one way to do that very same thing. I don't mind doing it on the fly around the time, or in October. Seems like a very good solution.
Okay, thank you, Director Weiner. Director Stanley, questions, comments?
Well, I'm never like the taking time off from board meetings thing. I always thought that it was much more convenient to just adjust as we went along and we looked at things. I do not remember fondly the recent time where we had a double board meeting. And I also, while the board's makeup is not changing this year due to the election, it makes it more convenient, I think, to hold our elections in December as we always have, because that's when our term starts. If for no other reason, then it gives who is elected as board president time to talk to board members and consider who he or she might want to suggest to be on a committee. And it's during a time where we would typically cancel the second board meeting, but canceling is so much easier than not. So there's usually a lot going on in December at the beginning during an election year. This year, not so much. So I'll remind board members, because I was doing a mental review of it this last year. We had a hellacious year last year. We had a director that we all cared for die. We interviewed for an appointed director, and we were forced to split into voting wards. And that's the reason why we pushed back to January to elect this year's board president. So I'm reminding people that's the reason why. It was a convenience, because we had a lot on our plate last year. So I'm just babbling, and my apologies. I'm in favor of having 2 board meetings a month, and then, as Claire suggested, which I think is very reasonable, to look at things in October, and granted it's already November, and adjust as needed. And I think that it's also very reasonable to hold board elections in December after the certification comes through, so that the new board president can have some time where he or she doesn't have a lot on their plate to consider what they need to be considered, so we can start the new year off working and being effective. I'm done. Thank you.
Dave, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
Yeah.
I think he's saying go to Director Suddeth.
Yeah, no. What I said was someone muted me. Don't do that again, whoever did it. Vice President Suddeth, questions, comments?
It was you who muted you.
No, I didn't mute myself.
Yes, I think, well, one of the reasons that we brought this up, I'm just going to be really, very transparent, was because the election is on, the inauguration is on the 20th.
Right.
And so, we were taking a look at the calendar, and just in a moment of being very transparent, in a moment of clarity, I'm being very selfish. I can't come on the 20th. I'm going to be in DC. I'm just telling you right now. I'm not going to be here. I'm taking my daughter, and I'm going to DC. And there it is. I'm just being transparent. I'm not going to be here. I'm not planning on being in. We have endured 1,460 some odd days, now 73 days.
Yeah.
And I'm going to DC. So I'm voting for this if I'm the only one who votes for it.
I think we have fairly good support on this, but if you're done, I have some questions as well.
Okay, but I do think that there's merit, and I think it was Director Owino who said it, there's merit in yes, there's merit in taking a break, but I do like the idea of what and what Miss Claire brought to the meeting when we were discussing this was that the regulatory things that we cannot do at a special meeting, which is one of the reasons why we must have a calendar that includes regular meetings, is that if for whatever reason we have to take an action, we have to have the meeting already scheduled. And this last year was, as Director Stanley said, was, yes, it was probably an anomaly where we had so many special meetings, but I can envision that with all the changes coming down, and we probably will have a lot of regulatory changes coming back from what I see coming down the pipeline, which I will, and Director Wiener, you've probably seen them, and Director Zepeda coming forth from some of the environmental changes that are being put forth. We may have a lot of regulatory changes that we may want to vote on or have to put into action. We may want to take a serious look at this, of making sure that we have these meetings already on the calendar. And as been mentioned by a couple of you, it's easier to take it off the calendar than it is to put it back on.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that we take a serious look at restoring this. I do have one question though about to our board attorney about. I thought that we are bound by either ordinance or regulation to vote in the first meeting in January. I thought that's what we read. So are we able to change it to December, or I thought we were bound to change, that we are supposed to vote in January? So can you clarify that for us? Because I was
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So yes, you're absolutely right. Currently, under our board policies and procedures, we provide for the election to occur in January. And the way that I drafted this, hopefully I'm answering your question. The way we drafted this was for this resolution to supersede that, and to by adoption of this resolution to supersede that policy. You can always change your own policies, and so it's not a state law. If at some point you want me to share my screen, I'm happy to show you the language, because one of the other things I was going to mention, Director Sudduth or Vice President Sudduth, is that I did create some options for you in this draft resolution to determine whether or not to include this election piece, right? There's two parts, right? There is, do we want to have regularly scheduled meetings twice a month, period, and then we'll cancel the ones we don't need. And it sounds like we've got a consensus on yes on that. And then the second question is, do we want to change the election of the officers, president and vice president, to December? And if that is a yes, then the question is, would the new officers take their positions immediately, or would it take place at the next meeting? And I think Director Stanley was identifying why it might be good for the president and vice president to take their positions at the next meeting, to give them some breathing room to think about what they want to do next. But it's up to the will of the board. But I have provided for both of those options in the draft, and we could either discuss that together. Someone could make a motion for it to go one way or the other. I can edit it right here and we can adopt it tonight. Or you can or you can direct me through a vote of the board to go back, redraft this, so you have some more time to look at it, and we could bring it back at the next board meeting. I hope I'm clear, and I'm happy to answer any further questions, but I'm trying to make it clear. And again, there's no rush. If we want to get it accomplished tonight, though, I think we could, or we could bring it back on December 2nd.
So that answered my question. Thank you very much. President Navarro, this all.
All set. Thank you. Claire, this question is for you. So if we adopt this schedule tonight, that means that the meeting on December 20th is back on, correct?
I believe it's the 16th.
I'm sorry. Is it the 16th?
December 16th?
Okay, so
December 16th, sorry. January 6th and 20th and then you could cancel the meeting on the 20th if you would like, and we could accomplish business at the meeting on January 6th. We would still have a January meeting, even if we cancel the January 20th meeting.
Okay, so this could be accomplished, so we could technically do the election of the officers on January 6th, correct?
We could, or we could do it on, if you vote for these two meetings, we could also do it on December the 16th.
16th,
Either
right? The election is not certified until the 4th of December, correct?
Correct.
Okay. All right, well, those were my two questions. I'm going to ask for what is the will of the body? I mean, what does anyone want to make a motion to approve this tonight, or would the board like? Let me finish. Or would you like for this to go to our next meeting to vote on it on the?
Make a motion.
President Alvarado,
Yes.
but before you, can I add one thing before you take a vote?
Sure. Go right ahead.
Okay. So I did just look, this is where some of the logistics make it very difficult on these things. So to have a meeting on January 6th, I believe it was the date, the agenda would be posted on, would be January 1st. And
Okay.
staff, we're not there January 1st. We're not probably there, most people, on January 31st. So we're backing in. And just to remind the board, that was one of the reasons as well that some of these things were pushed out. So I did just want to say there's some logistical issues around winter holidays, if you will,
Okay.
and a lot of people being off. So I just want to bring that to your attention. And staff had actually been in support of actually moving things to January as well, more than just last year. So that was all I wanted to add.
Thank you, Lisa. Claire, what do you think about that?
So we can also, this is the will of the board. We could also change it to be the second and fourth Wednesdays of January, if that would create some room. Of course, then you may have an issue in 1 month where you have a fourth Wednesday of a January butts right up against the first Wednesday in a February. So nothing's perfect. But I think the general manager raises a really good point. If we are going to do it on the 6th, for example, this year, the agendas would actually have to be done by December 30th or 31st, depending on whether or not you have a holiday that day. And, that does create a little bit of a crunch. Then again, it might, there may be a way to say we want this to be a light agenda. We're just going to deal with elections and committees or something like that. By norm, we could establish that that's going to be a light meeting that is only going to deal with the new items in the year. I hesitate
valid
to
point. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I just think it is important that we are thoughtful about the demands on staff over the holidays. And so I do want to make sure that is fleshed out in a way in which the general manager is giving you meaningful input on this. And I think it's really important, to take into account what the constraints are from staff, because they are preparing for all of you. And I just want to make sure that we are we are coming with a spirit of generosity on understanding the difficulties and maybe not the difficulties, but the work that does go into preparing these meetings for all of you.
Yeah, I agree. I think we need to be cognizant of the effect it's going to have on staff. All right, so Director Steve made a motion to approve this. Do I have a second?
I'd like to make a motion.
I think you already did, and I'm asking for a second now.
Well, hold on. I'm sorry. I have to interrupt. I need to understand, because we gave you options within the proposed resolution. Director Stanley, if I may ask, please, would your motion be
getting cut off? That's what I was trying to do, Claire. So my motion is that we go to 2 meetings a month, that in January 2021 only, that we cancel the second meeting in January and we move the first meeting a week, so it ends up in mid-month for January only, and that the board elections are go back to what they've always been in December, and this year that would be about mid-month, the 16th. Didn't you say, or the 18th, something like that? So that's my
Correct,
motion.
the 16th.
I did correct? Claire?
Okay, yeah, just for the sake of the record and for the sake of a second, what we would be doing, and I can document this and put it up on screen if that would assist the members of the board of directors, based on what I'm looking at, that we would say in January so the addition would be that in January 2021 only, the meetings, a single meeting will be held on January the 13th, which is the second Wednesday in
Okay.
January. Okay. And other than that, then the changes, and I will put this up on screen if it pleases the board.
Before I ask for a second, I want you to put it on the screen.
All right. Can you see that?
I can see it.
Okay, so this was the resolution that was in your packet, and this bracketed item was to deal with whether or not we were going to do the officer's assumption.
Okay.
So this would recite that the prior resolution, the director's policies and procedures, which Vice President Sutter has mentioned, provided that the members of the board elect a president at the first regular meeting of each calendar year, and that those officers assume their duties upon election. This is one of the things we're changing.
Right.
The board intends by this resolution to establish that the election for president and vice president will be held at the second meeting in December, and that the president and vice president will assume their duties. And I believe your motion, and please correct me if I'm wrong, would be they would take their office at the following meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah,
No,
that's what happens. See, what happens is that the election is usually the last item in the agenda.
Not necessarily.
Well, it was that way last year and the year before that, if I recall. But yeah, that's the way it is.
Well, if we set it up this way that their duties would be assumed at the following meeting, then they would know who was elected, and then they wouldn't sit as the president until they would hand over the gavel, and then they would assume that duty as soon as they sat down at the next meeting.
That's correct.
If anyone has a concern about that, I'm happy to revert it.
If I can add that logistically, it's very difficult, the way it's been handled in the past, where they would like half the meeting would be this way and then they would change seats. So I would say from a logistics perspective, doing it at the next meeting makes sense from that.
Why don't you continue, Claire? We'll take
Okay.
questions and comments after.
Okay. So then this provides for the new election. Then these are the actual resolutions that the prior approach is rescinded, that effective immediately, the board of directors meetings will be held on the first and third Wednesday of each month at 6:30 p.m. In January 2021 only, a single meeting will be held that month on January 13th.
Okay.
You can say at 6:30 p.m.
Yeah. All right. Well, that appears to be Director Stanley's motion, unless Director Stanley wants to change something in her motion.
I'm sorry, may I proceed just one more thing? This
Sure,
is the
go ahead.
officer elections.
Yeah.
So then the officer elections would be held at the second meeting in December. And that the officers elected at that meeting will assume their offices effective, I believe we're saying at the following meeting of the board of directors.
That's correct.
And that would be the entirety of the resolution.
Okay.
I had a question about that. Previously, and I remember President Alvarado that a board member who was president was leaving office, and you had expressed at that time, I think this was a couple years ago, that we needed to have an election, and that the person took effect immediately, not that anything happened, so that there wasn't a lag period in which a possibility of a lag period of which there was no president. In this case, nobody's going anywhere, but it could be an election year and a director may be leaving office, and thus, what does that mean? So we could have no president or vice president, possibly. So I
Yes.
think that they should assume their duties immediately, possibly at the end of the meeting in December, so that if there was a need for a president or a vice president to be in office, that they were, but we wouldn't have another meeting until January.
Claire, let me ask you a question about that. This is not set in stone. We can always, if that situation arises where the current president is no longer elected and he has to leave office, obviously, then we can do a resolution that basically addresses that, correct?
Yeah, the vice president would take over, and in the absence of the vice president, yes,
Right,
and then there would be a subsequent election, yes.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, no,
But it's a fair point.
Right.
I mean, I just want to acknowledge it's a fair point, and
yeah.
again, either way is acceptable legally.
Yeah. All right. Any further thoughts, Director Stanley?
No.
Okay. All right. So can I have a second for this motion, please?
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt one more time. I apologize. So do I understand then that Director Stanley's motion, because she's the one who did make it, would include this language, that they would assume their office is effective immediately upon election? I believe that's the motion that Director Stanley is making. Is that correct, Director Stanley?
Well, I'm trying to compromise with President Alvarado in that we're not playing musical chairs, which is what we've done in the past. So if we held the vote to the end of the meeting, then the new president and vice president could take their positions, but we're going to join the meeting, I suppose.
Well, maybe what would be help here, why don't we just say will be held at as the last action item at the second meeting in December? Would that help?
Yeah.
That's probably good. I mean, we're spending a lot of time on this. I really want to move on to the next item, so. Is that okay with you, Director Stanley?
I'm fine.
Okay. All right. Claire, are you done?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we can have a second for this motion.
Mr. President, can I make a friendly amendment?
Sure, go ahead.
So I was looking at the calendar for 2021, 2022, and I think instead of having to rehash this every year, can we just remove the year, so 2021, to making it for all? Because we're going to have this problem all the time, right? So if we have to put the agenda out 72 hours before, you're going to have holidays and weekends. So this is going to happen every year for a while. So we might as well fix it and not just make it for this year.
Yeah, I think that's a very valid point, Director Cepeda.
And I think that it should be that that the meetings then gets moved to the second Wednesday as opposed to the first Wednesday of the month, and that be the meeting for January.
Mm-hmm.
Then my other friendly amendment, if Director would take it, can we say that the second meeting of December or after the election results are confirmed, because in December 2021, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that the election is always confirmed by December 15th. And if so, that would be our second meeting of that particular month.
It's first Friday of the month.
Yeah, the election code requires that the registrar certify it by the first Friday in December. Whether they actually do that or not is a different question, but that is what the code provides under the Uniform Election Law.
Okay. Oh, perfect. And if we're going to have it by the first Friday, then that gives us enough time to figure out who our president and vice president are going to be on the second Tuesday or the second Wednesday of the month. Then that's it. Then the only change will be to remove the 2021 from the number there.
So I've proposed some language on your screen.
Yeah.
Perfect. Yeah. So if Director Stanley takes my friendly amendment, then I'll second it.
I'm fine with that. Oh, I'm fine with that. Am I on? Can you hear me? I'm sorry. I'm not on mute, am I?
Yes.
Okay.
Nope. We can hear you.
Okay, looks like the item's been moved and seconded. So can we take the roll?
Yes, thank you. President Alvarado?
Yes.
Vice President Sidis?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Weiner?
Yes.
Director Stanley?
Yes.
And Director Cepeda?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0 as amended.
Hey, thank you very much. Before we go on to information reports, we're going to take about a 5-minute bathroom break, okay? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Director Cepeda.
What?
All right. Looks like I see Harry, I see Cesar, I see Sherry, and I see Cheryl's picture, but I don't see Cheryl. There you are. All right, so it looks like everybody's back, so let's go on to the next item, please.
Thank you. Next item is information reports. 6A, receive an update on West County Wastewater's response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Okay, Lisa, who's giving us an update on this?
So I'm going to actually just give you a few kind of opening comments, and then you have a report that was prepared. So certainly if there are any specific questions, staff can answer those. What I really wanted to just say is that, we have been providing an update to the board on a regular basis regarding our response to COVID. And what I asked Andrew and the rest of the executive team is to really put together for the board a report that gave you an understanding of what we've been focusing on, not just responding to the changing conditions, but all of the things that have actually been done and accomplished throughout this period of time. And I think it's important to understand that, just as everybody else around the world is struggling with COVID and how to respond to and all the different issues that come up, we're doing the same thing. And COVID isn't really a project that starts and stops. It is a constant for us, and it has forced us to not just look at what's happening in the moment, but it's a whole new way of doing business for the organization. And, the point Director Stanley made earlier on a different item, the question of why was it taking so long to hire a position? And I think it was a really good point, because it speaks to there are other projects that we had or other priorities that we had prior to COVID that have shifted as a result of that. And so there are some things that have taken us much longer to get to. At the same time, there are several things that we've actually been able to push forward. And there's just some unique challenges that occur with COVID. And a couple of those, is, as I mentioned, a whole new way of doing business. But for example, we've had to hire several people in the midst of COVID, and it's not just the recruiting, it's actually how do you onboard new staff in the midst of COVID? How do you ensure that people know how to communicate and collaborate? and how do you monitor work? So it really has forced the entire organization to do things in a different way. We have several supervisors, in fact, that have started in the midst of COVID, and how do they create a team, and how do they create an environment where they can get to know their staff? So these are things that sometimes get, I think, just lost in the midst of talking about what we're doing to respond to COVID. But I really just wanted to highlight for the board where we are, what we've been doing. I think I'm actually incredibly proud of the organization and the very rapid change we were able to implement to respond to and continue to make sure that we were serving our community. And I think within a very short period of time, we were able to adjust, and we've continued to adjust. And it includes things where we might have a shift, for example, to ensure that our staff are separated, and then now we have daylight savings time, and so we have to rethink those shifts. So it is a constant reevaluating of what's going on. As everyone's aware, the COVID rates are skyrocketing and surging. So this is also forcing us to look at our operation again and have to reevaluate the protocols that we've put in place. And again, looking at, well, perhaps where we've allowed people to come to the office 2 or 3 days a week, maybe we're going to have to pull back on that to ensure that people are safe. So again, I just really wanted to kind of highlight some of those things for you. I think, some of the priorities we've been able to push forward are fantastic things for the organization, like being able to go paperless, really looking at so many systems. And I have asked Justin actually to do a report sometime in the near future. The number of IT systems that have been pushed forward in this period of time have been incredible. And the staff has been amazing in terms of getting those things done. And so again, I really wanted to highlight some of those things for you, and some of the issues that we don't normally really focus on and talk about or highlight during a COVID response. And I think we're moving away from this just being a response to our new way of doing business, which I know sounds cliche at this point because everybody's using it, but it really is. And I think we have emerged as a stronger organization, but it definitely comes at a cost. There are some things that have had to be shifted around and haven't been completed as quickly as we'd like to. So that was it. And again, if there are any specific questions, staff's here to answer those questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Lisa. I can imagine this has been a trying time for everybody, and like you say, the numbers in COVID have spiked recently, and it doesn't seem to be getting any better, and probably won't get better for at least a couple of months. So, keep up the good work, and we'll ask the directors now if they have any questions. Director Cepeda, questions, comments?
There we go. Just a couple comments. One, congrats on the workplace safety. And thank you to all the staff for being able to work in in this new environment and being able to accomplish this great list. So as I kept scrolling down and down, and I was like, all right, everybody has definitely been very busy. So thank you for continuing to chug along and continuing to keep our agency moving forward, even though there's this pandemic and these unknowns out there. We keep moving forward, so thank you for that. That's it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Cepeda. Director Weiner, questions, comments?
Okay, well, push the button, it doesn't work sometimes. I wanted to echo Director Cepeda and, thank the staff for working under difficult conditions. I also want to thank our general manager for bringing up a positive from the COVID, which was converting everybody to using IT as part of their job. It was forced upon you, but everybody accepted it, and that's really probably the only positive thing I've heard about COVID since we started down this pathway. So that's my only comment.
Thank you, Director Stanley. I'm sorry, Director Weiner. Director Stanley.
I'm going to keep whatever comments I have about changing my name. Whoever would be appropriate to ask this question, how, when this all first, hello? When this all first started, I'm getting an echo. Is Cheryl?
There is an echo.
Sounds like it's your
Okay.
connection.
Okay. So when this all first started, everybody was operating in the dark, and we approved some time, and I forget what it was, but how is this working out for the employees with vacation time, sick time? Are they still all getting paid full time? How is all that working out?
So staff is, I believe, and I'm not sure if it's in this report or not, but we have been reporting, we have been using some, what approved was essentially COVID leave for staff. And that was approved in March at the very beginning. For the most part, all of our staff are working, so we are using very minimal amounts of COVID leave. There are some staff that still are using it at times because we haven't full staffing in the same ways at the same time. We also change shifts. So that's how we're working. I mean, staff is still able to use their vacation or sick leave as appropriate. But if we are actually changing their schedule and not allowing them to come in, those are really the conditions when COVID leave kicks in. And Andrew, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Well, I think we've gotten our percentages, by pay period of COVID leave down to less than 5% consistently. And that's exactly right. As we've shifted, we've changed shifts. We've gone to some longer shifts with CSO. We've staggered them. Lots of people working from home. So as many ways as we can find people to continue to be productive and then reduce that. But when there are some instances where we can't have a certain number of people in the office and we're asking them to stay home, then we provide the COVID leave, and that is intended, as was presented to the board on March 18, is to keep people whole, because we're asking them to stay home. The same we would apply it when if we were doing some contact tracing because somebody was potentially infectious who would come to the office or something like that, and we would send people home on quarantine, to just take some time until they could get a test or get cleared by their doctors. We would use it at those times as well if they were not eligible for the state or federal funds.
Thank you. I've been wondering about all this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Director Stanley. Vice President Sutter?
Yes. So a couple of questions. Thank you. It's nice, good report, nice report. A couple of questions. So are we going to get I know that, we are a critical infrastructure. We've been designated. I saw that part, and I kind of figured as much. And I know we've talked before about the EOC or the Emergency Operations Center and what you guys are doing for that. Are we going to get a report like about that, or what the plans are for that? And when you do have like any reported COVID cases, how is that communicated? And are we doing any type of contact tracing, and how is that communicated? Or do we have any plans for doing anything more digital in that realm? Or since we're getting into the electronic realm, I want to know if we're going to go more electronic with that. And then the last thing is, I know I mentioned it before about the state smart plan, and I just want to know if we are moving towards that, especially as Contra Costa can't seem to stay out of the red and purple zone. Are we gonna go with the state's, that smart plan with the SMART plan? That's it. Thank you.
So I'm just going to answer a few of those questions and ask Andrew to sort of fill in the gaps. The EOC, and I'm sorry, I'm not remembering our specific conversations around them, but internally what we have talked about is creating some type of emergency operations center within our organization. It's very common in cities to do this, and cities also have something called a department operations center. So it's very common in public works, in particular when there's an incident. We will be working on that. We have not actually formalized that. That's definitely one of the projects that is tasked under our safety position that, as we've mentioned to the board previously, we've been having some difficulty with that. So we will be working to get a consultant on board prior to moving forward again with the recruitment. So that will fall under that work. So to answer that question, on the COVID reporting, when we have an incident, there are some specific protocols that were put out and some requirements, legal requirements around that. And we are following those specific protocols, and Andrew can give you more specifics on that. And again, I'm not familiar with the SMART plan, so we can follow up offline on that one, or unless Andrew, you know that one, I don't know I'm not familiar with that one. So. Go ahead, Andrew.
Okay. Yeah, as far as, like Lisa said, on emergency operations, et cetera, that's consistent with the grant that we applied for, we talked about earlier this evening too. As part of that is develop a continuity plan, and that will be for power, et cetera. As far as the SMART plan, we haven't moved forward on really seeing what we can do with that. And I know you've mentioned that before, Director Sutton. What we're primarily following within all the workplaces, the Cal OSHA, the workplace exposure control plans, et cetera. And so we are adhering to all the requirements and are more than meeting the requirements of the county, et cetera. And we're following closely when the changes happen. But many of the changes that happened, like moving from orange to red, really there were no specific changes that applied to us as a result of that. There's a stronger encouragement for us to keep people out of the office, and that's certainly what we're doing. And it raises our awareness that the virus is spreading and is more prevalent in our community, so it's more likely that people could come to our office infected, and so we have to be careful with that. But most of those changes in those tiers have to do with types of businesses that can be open and how many people can be in them. And we are open, we are operating, and we have continued to operate, and it did not impact or change in any way construction activity as well. So when it starts to change and impact construction activity again, that would certainly have an impact on us. It's having an impact, but I mean, the procedures that we set in place as far back as late March are still pretty much the standards we're following. We were strict then, and we're strict now, and we're going to continue to do so.
Thank you.
Vice President Sutton, was that satisfactory?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. I'll just echo the comments I had before. I think what staff is doing is great, and we just need to make sure in these next couple of months that we stay extra careful, make sure everybody wears their mask. And that's all I have. Next item, please.
Thank you. Next item is item 6B, and that is receive the General Manager's report for the months of September and October 2020.
All right, Lisa, just give us a quick synopsis.
Yeah, so I'm going to actually ask, Justin has a comment to make here specifically around the financial information that was presented. But certainly this is the report that we provide I think we're actually doing it now every 2 months. And we can take any specific questions you have on any of the items. We provide both a narrative kind of summary as well as some of the statistics. So Justin, go ahead and make your comment. And then.
Sure. I just want to point out that in the financial reports, really starting on page 53 of your packet, the column that's budget to actual variance, at the very bottom, this has this negative $55 million number. That's actually misleading. It should really be, it's doing the incorrect calculation. It really should be the prior two columns, the adjusted 21 adjusted budget and the actuals through October. Should be subtracting both of those, and it should be closer to negative 1.8 million. And it's just comparing. So it's just let you know that the numbers of the budget and the actuals are correct. It's just the variance, the budget to actuals, are look like it could be misleading if you're looking at the subtotals.
And to further clarify, that does not mean that we have a $1.8 million deficit. What it means is that what has been collected and or spent in comparison to the authorized budget, that's the number that it's claiming. So it is not at all a statement that we are $1.8 million in the hole, just to clarify that. But we will provide a corrected report that has the correct number on that going forward. Or for this, we'll replace this report on the next meeting.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks to Justin. Let's start with Director Stanley. Questions, comments?
Can you come back to me?
Sure. Director Cepeda?
Yeah, I want to just say welcome to our new employees, our district clerk. Last time we welcomed her as well, Brenda, and also our human resources manager, Lynette Hart. So welcome to both of them, and congrats on the team for the safety again. 10 months of going without any recordable safety incidents. Also, just a FYI, I'm sure you already know, but if any of our employees contract COVID, it would be an OSHA reportable incident. There was a new regulation on that a couple of weeks ago. I don't know if you saw that or not, but hopefully we don't get anybody and we continue it as is. So, but that is it. Thank you so much. Good report, Lisa. Thank you, Justin, for the updated numbers.
Thank you, Director Cepeda. Director Weiner, questions, comments?
Yeah, so along with what, it's interesting that Director Cepeda brought up this. My question was, is the OSHA or Cal OSHA incidents including the incidents of infection of COVID in this report?
To my knowledge, it does not include that. Andrew, can you?
Can you ask that question again? I didn't quite follow.
Okay, so the report says we've gone past 10 plus months without a lost time or otherwise recordable to OSHA and Cal OSHA safety incident. And the rules now should include a COVID case. And I was wondering if our current number does not or does include COVID.
Well, that's a very good question. I see. I got it now. I understand. In that we did have, and we are required, if we have an employee contract COVID and arrive at the workplace, to notify all employees. And we did have one, and that happened not that long ago. And that was reported to all the employees. So yes, that would be a reportable case, I think, under the new guidelines. So to some degree, that might not be a fully correct statement.
Okay, thank you. Just wanted to know if we had any cases reported.
We had one, and we did the contact tracing, and we followed the state requirements to notify employees that an employee had contracted COVID. And that's as far as we can go, and we can't say anything more, but we're required to say that much.
Well, it looks like we're doing better than the county by far.
That's an understatement.
And then I had some questions about the financials. On table 3, operating expenditures, what kind of things are depreciated in operating expenses? And then my other question is, in capital expenses, can't depreciation be predicted and therefore budgeted?
Yeah, I can kind of answer those. So depreciation is really, on an asset that we're going to purchase that's going to have a specific, useful life, and then we, divide up, whatever the cost we purchased it, and then we make accounting entries. And depreciation is really something that we just do at the end of the fiscal year. It's a non-budgeted line item, so we don't budget for it because we're not moving money. It's just since it's just an accounting transaction, we're saying we're reserving money from this item that we purchased, and we're going to put, essentially set it aside because it's, we're losing the value, so we can purchase it again, or we can replace it when the life is over. So it's not a budgeted line item, and it's really just a year-end accounting transaction. But it's really anything that we would buy that would be has a useful life over a certain period of time, over a certain dollar amount, that we would depreciate.
Yeah, I just wondered if it could be used in a predictive manner so that by the time the end of the year occurred, we could see that that we had gone over our depreciation or under our depreciation guesstimates, like that.
So Director Weiner, we don't actually budget for depreciation. It's not an item that is included in budget. As Justin just said, it's really an accounting transaction. So you will not see, and you should not see it on these reports.
Yeah. Oh, except for there was, 000 in the budgeted, and then an amount in actuals for the year of.
Yeah,
right. The transaction doesn't happen until actually the end of the fiscal year.
Right. Okay. Just wanted to be able to read this and understand what's going on. And then is the check register part of the total report?
Yes, it's here.
Yes.
Okay,
It
so
follows.
right. So I have one question regarding the check register. Do we still retain the services of Burke, Williams, and Sorensen?
We do.
And if yes, when are they expected to turn over their responsibilities to our new council?
So Burke Williams hasn't necessarily been providing legal guidance since, well, I don't think they have actually since new general counsel has been appointed. As I've mentioned previously, Burke Williams was hired to do policy review, and that's what they've done. So their work will conclude once we have concluded all of the work around the policy review. I think we're actually very close to that. I think that's been turned over to general counsel to take a look as well. But again, the Burke Williams was hired for the purpose of policy review, which is what they did.
That's all I have.
Thank you, Director Weiner. Director Stanley, questions, comments?
Just a minute. Can you hear me?
Yep.
I think what I wanted to say comes under future agenda items. So I have nothing here.
Okay, thank you, Director Stanley. Vice President Sutter?
Yes. Good job. Congratulations on these 219 months of environmental stewardship. It's quite an accomplishment. And then I have a question because I'm a little confused on these because my understanding is different on this COVID reportable case. My understanding is that it's reportable to OSHA if it's contracted in the workplace, not if it's any COVID case. If someone contracts COVID in their home and they're away from the workplace and they're just any employee who gets COVID, it's not a reportable OSHA incident. So, Ms. Claire, do you have any clarification on that?
I don't. I'm sorry. I have not looked at those specific regs, but I'm happy to do so.
Yeah, because we had
We'll
this come
verify.
in my office, and I believe that the clarification that we received was that if in this case that was just mentioned by Sir Andrew, is if you did the contract tracing and the individual actually infected another individual at work, or it was passed back and forth, then it would be an OSHA reportable incident.
The general rule for OSHA reportables is it has to take place during the workday or at the work site. So, if you get it at home and it has nothing to do with work, then it has nothing to do with occupational safety and health, which is the point of OSHA. But everything is different under COVID, and so I don't want to give you a legal opinion on COVID when everything is different. But we're happy to look at it. But generally that is correct. That would be true with any other disease.
Yeah, that was the guidance we were given about reportables. But I just want to make sure if you can let us know, so everybody's clear.
And it is correct to state it was not contracted at the workplace, and no other employees contracted it because of that particular individual who was infectious. And that was and I mentioned earlier that perhaps our statement was incorrect, and we will definitely look into that to make certain.
Okay, yeah. And I just wanted to clear that up because that's what we were told to. We were given the same advice, so I just wanted to make sure that. But I would think that we need to make sure that everybody is certain that that's the way that we're supposed to be reporting things.
Mm-hmm.
But thank you. But I say good
you.
job. It's a good report.
Thank you, Vice President Sutter. I have no comments or questions, so next item, please.
Next item is matters from staff, general manager, and general counsel.
Okay, staff, make it brief, please.
Oh, and I'm gonna have to cut down my 20-minute presentation. No, I just have a very quick comment, and actually I'm gonna hand it over to our general counsel, who is gonna do some brief training. But I did want to just take a moment to thank the executive leadership team and Andrew Clow, who stepped in for me as acting general manager while I was out. The list and report back I got of the things that occurred while I was gone was extensive. So I just wanted to thank them at this meeting for really keeping things going. I also want to thank our new general counsel, Claire Collins, who also was instrumental in making sure things continued while I was out. So those are my only comments. The rest of the executive leadership doesn't have any additional comments, but as I mentioned, our general counsel is going to do a brief presentation, so I'll hand it over to her.
Thank you, General Manager. I recognize that the hour is late and we have been on this call for nearly 2 hours. So I'm going to abbreviate my training for the sake of brevity, and we will continue it at a future meeting. President Alvarado asked me to begin providing brief trainings at each board meeting since we are all together and since I am new, in order to go over issues related to board governance in general and the responsibilities of us as an agency. If I may, I'd like to share my screen again. And I'm going to this is intended to be a 15-minute presentation. I'm going to try to pack it into 7 minutes, and with the assurance that I will come back and do more, and with the request that at the end, that if you have specific areas of training that you are looking for, I will endeavor to provide them, or myself, or to have others provide them to you. But we're going to kind of start big and go specific. And in the future, I also will try to provide timely trainings that are associated with different periods of the year. So for example, when we have to do your Form 700 filing, doing a training around Form 700, close to that time period, so you can be prepared. So with that, I'm going to share my screen. And hopefully you see a big sunshine in a second.
Mm-hmm.
Because today we're going to talk about sunshine laws. And please interrupt me if I go too quickly. I am going to try to be prompt, but I don't want to be confusing. So what I wanted to start with in my trainings was to go over what I consider the big three that every public agency in the state, and quite frankly, there's a corollary in the federal government and across the country in every state, in connection with government transparency. We generally refer to these things as sunshine laws because they let the sunshine in. And I'm hopeful that other people actually know what this is referencing. But the goal is to, because the government, including our government, is of the people, by the people, and for the people, those people are entitled to know the vast majority of what their public agencies are doing, and they are entitled to provide public comment on them. So the three primary sunshine laws applicable to the district, and I know that you have understanding of all of these and you've been trained before, but bear with me. The big three relate to meetings, materials, and money. So the first is the Brown Act, the second is the Public Records Act, the third is the Political Reform Act. I'm going to very quickly go over them and then we'll go into greater detail at a future date. As you know, government ethics laws are based on the ideals for how government should work for the people and be open to the public. These laws set the minimum standards for behavior. They try to capture society's norms surrounding what is right and wrong, but in practice, compliance with government ethics laws may not always be common sense. And I really want to make this point because there's a lot of times where folks will say to me, well, golly, I don't see why that is. And once we scratch the surface and get into some of the background, it will make more sense, but it's not necessarily following your common sense that gets you to the legally compliant position. Nevertheless, we all have an internal sense of what is ethical. And if your ethics alarm bell goes off, stop and figure out what doesn't feel right instead of looking for loopholes around government ethics laws. A good rule of thumb is to ask yourself, what should I do instead of what can I do? And if you've got any questions, that's what I'm here for. I'm here to answer your questions, especially with respect to government ethics laws, because those can be very tricky, very sticky, and they're not always clear. So please feel free to call my number. I also want to point out that appearances matter. Someone might do something that is technically legal, but it looks bad. Conduct that appears to be unethical, inappropriate, or biased could not only injure your personal reputation, but it could also injure the reputation of the agency as a whole. And that's why these sunshine laws are so important, to make sure that we're not only complying with them, but we're always appearing to comply with them. With that, I'm going to tell you about Caesar's wife. Has anybody here, and I don't know that I can see all of you, heard of Caesar's wife before? Okay, I'm seeing some shaking heads.
It's not mine.
It's not yours. This one has an E, an AE. So Caesar's wife. This is a drawing or an imprint of a coin from ancient Rome. This woman's name was Pompeia. She was the second wife of Julius Caesar. And an important part of the story I want to tell you is that Caesar is not a name other than, of course, our esteemed director. In this case, Caesar is a title. Right? Caesar in German is Kaiser. It means the ruler. It means the emperor. It means the government in these cases. But in this case, we're talking about Julius Caesar and his wife Pompeia, and his wife entertained as wives of Roman emperors often did. And she held a garden party for the ladies in town. And it was going to be the source of, the site of a bunch of gossip. And a man dressed up as a woman and snuck into the party. And it was discovered. It became a huge scandal, even though both parties denied having an affair. Both parties said they didn't know each other, and no one at the party saw anything wrong. Julius Caesar didn't care, and he divorced her. And the folks around him said, well, golly, nothing bad happened here. And he said, I don't care. Caesar's wife must be above reproach. And you'll hear me over time talk about Caesar's wife. And Caesar's wife is the idea that we must all, as servants of the government, for the people, be Caesar's wife. We must be above reproach. We cannot be putting ourselves in a position where we even appear to be committing an impropriety. We have to be better than that. So Caesar's wife is this idea that sometimes bare legal compliance isn't enough. We have to ensure that we are representing to the public that we are doing what's in their best interest at all times. I actually think I talked about Caesar's wife the first time I met the general manager. And that's how important it is to me, that it's a fundamental issue that we talk about actually all the time in our office. So that said, when we do our trainings in a little bit more depth, we will talk about the Brown Act, which of course we're conducting this meeting pursuant to the Brown Act, which is our open meetings law. As you guys know, it's required whenever there's a majority of the members of a legislative body. And that includes both this board as well as your committees. So remember that, I'm sorry. So remember that if you are, if you have a majority of the committee or the majority of the board together at one time, you cannot talk about business unless you have a noticed and open public meeting. Of course, there are some exceptions, like when you're at a conference and you're not talking about business, but remember, you cannot discuss district business while you are there together. If you do want to talk about business, it has to have a published notice. You have to identify the topics you're going to talk about, and the public has to be able to attend. They have to be able to hear, and they have to be able to be heard on any item of the agenda, except, of course, for closed sessions, which have to be kept confidential. Again, a reminder, it does apply to the board of directors, so any 3 members of the board of directors, and it also applies to our committees that are established by the board. Now, our committees have 2 members. 2 members of the board generally don't make a quorum, right? But when they're members of the same committee, they do make a Brown Act legislative body. And so one of the things to remember is if you are on a committee, then you cannot call the other member of the committee and talk about anything that is an issue that that committee would consider. That would be a violation of the Brown Act. So you can talk about other things, but if you are on the planning committee, you cannot talk about planning agenda items if you are the 2 members of the planning committee, unless you're in a notice board meeting. If you're on the global warming committee, you cannot talk about global warming committee issues on a call outside of a regularly noticed meeting. Committees are sometimes where people get tripped up, so I just want to make sure that I'm reminding you of that. And if you've got any questions, of course, give me a call. This also is a really important issue for why we should have well-defined scopes for each of your committees, which is an issue we'll talk about at a later time, but that will hopefully help us in making sure that we're staying clean with the Brown Act. So with that, we'll talk real quickly about the Public Records Act. California Public Records Act is our open documents or records law. It allows any member of the public to request to inspect or receive copies of any records held by the district. I want everyone to be clear on the fact that it's not just a paper document. It's not just an electronic email. It actually can be all of your text messages, your voicemails, your calendar entries, your sound and video recordings, photographs. Remember that if it is reviewed, prepared, or retained by any member of the staff or any member of the board of directors, and it is in connection with our work as a district, it is a public record, and it doesn't matter where it's kept. So it could be on your personal phone or your personal computer hard drive. And if it is, then it's a public record. And if we get a request for that record, we can demand to inspect your personal phone or your personal computer in order to obtain those public records. Anybody can request these records, and we've got to respond to them within 10 days. So my takeaway on this is, high-level core issue, you have a diminished expectation of privacy as a public official or a public employee. You do not have the same level of privacy expectation as a standard member of the public, and you have to keep that in mind because more scrutiny can be placed on you. And therefore, if you, oh, sorry, Director Wiener? You're on mute. I'm sorry, Director Wiener.
Thank you. I would just like at a future time, some clarification regarding the idea that all of our records are kept on servers that reside at the district, And I may have a copy of an email, but the actual document is kept on a server at the district. So I'm just wondering if there's been any court cases regarding that, but I'll leave that for another time.
No. I think it's a fair question. I'm happy to answer it right now because I can answer it quickly. If we have a copy of it on the district servers, that's great. The problem arises when one uses one's private email address, one's private phone number for texting, or uses one's private computer's C drive, or a private thumb drive or something like that to store those records, and there is no other copy of it anywhere else on the district system. Each one of you, as I understand it, has been provided with a district-issued cell phone and a district-issued laptop or tablet, and I strongly encourage you to limit your district-related work to those devices and not to use personally owned cell phone or computer, because there is a likelihood that you could end up with district records inadvertently on those and there wouldn't be a copy anywhere else, and that would lead us to have to search those. If they're in your email and you're using your district email account, no problem. We've got access to that. But if you are using a private phone number or a private email address, it's a different issue. And so I encourage you strongly not to use those. I encourage you strongly to use your district issued profiles for that purpose. And exactly because, Director Weiner, we can actually search that from the server side instead of from your personal device. Now that we do so much in the cloud, it's less of a risk, but we still have folks who take pictures on their phones, who keep a separate personal calendar, for example, that's not part of an Outlook calendar, that send emails on their private account with constituents or with staff members. And that's a recipe for losing some of your privacy, because we may end up having to go through your email account and see all of your personal emails in order to get to the ones that are publicly related. And so that's just my advice to you, is try to keep those things segregated. There are some exemptions that we can withhold records on some limited bases, but when in doubt, expect that it can go out. And so therefore, be very careful when creating records. Be careful what you say. If it is something that you would be uncomfortable seeing on a movie screen before 12 jurors, don't put it in writing, please. And if you are concerned, call me. But that is where some of these things end up. And I will tell you, as a word of warning, that a few years ago, there was a Public Records Act request on the City of San Diego, which sought every email in the City of San Diego's possession, custody, or control that included the following terms: LOL, WTF, OMG, 2 or more exclamation points in a row. Things like that are valid requests for public records, and you know that that requester was looking for salacious material to use against the city. But the court ruled that it was valid, and they had to go find those things. So think carefully before you put something in writing, especially if it could be in any way in any way the subject of question. Let me put it that way. Okay, the last big topic, and again, I'm sorry I'm taking a little bit longer than I said I would, is the Political Reform Act. This is the money. When we talk about conflict of interest in the law, we are not talking about differences of opinion. We're not actually even talking, in most cases, about people having divided loyalties. We are talking about money. We are talking about when someone has a personal stake in something that the district is deciding upon. So the primary core issue here is that public officials should not benefit financially from their positions in government. And so we do have to be very careful about this. The Political Reform Act is the primary law. Code 1090, which you've also probably heard of, also about self-dealing in contracts. These are serious, serious issues. If you are found to violate them, it could be a misdemeanor or a felony. You could be permanently barred from running for office ever again. You could go to jail. That's therefore why this is very serious, and it leads to why we have a conflict of interest code and we have disclosure requirements. Again, this is a financial impact when we talk about a conflict of interest. We will talk in greater detail at a later date about what to do if there is a potential conflict of interest. And we are definitely available to counsel you on that. I don't know what your personal financial holdings are. Therefore, I'm not in a position to warn you about these most of the time. You have to make independent judgments over whether or not you potentially have any financial interest in the outcome or in a contract or with the district. For that purpose, we do have a conflict of interest code we adopt every 2 years. We're in the process of working on that right now since I've joined the district. And then from that, as you all know, you have to file Form 700s in the spring. And so I will help with a Form 700 training if you'd like in the spring. And that's where we disclose, and I do one too. I do a full disclosure. We disclose what our economic interests are so the public, again, sunshine laws, have an opportunity to know where your economic interests are and to be able to check on all of us to make sure that we're not self-dealing. All right, so that concludes my basics. Again, if you have requested trainings, love to hear from you. We'll try to put together the trainings that are the greatest use for the directors. My next one, I'm intending to talk about parliamentary procedure. And then we'll lay out hopefully a schedule for a variety of short trainings and if necessary, long trainings to provide to each of you. And I do trainings all the time, and people who go to trainings typically are much more comfortable with this approach. So thank you again. And in the interest of time, I'm happy to take any questions now or separately, but thank you again.
Well, thank you for that presentation, Claire. It was very enlightening. And I look forward to your continued trainings. In the interest of time, I'm going to ask that all board members who have any questions about tonight's training to either email you or call you directly, okay? So we can move this agenda forward. Next item, please.
Thank you. Next item is 8A, matters of the board.
Okay, so we'll start with Director Weiner.
I have no matters to discuss tonight.
Okay, thank you, Director Weiner. Director Stanley.
I have nothing.
Director Cepeda.
The only thing I wanted to say, and maybe I've missed it before, but I wanted to thank whoever's creating the agendas now. You added the strategic plan compliance section that's been added to the agenda, and I think that is a great addition. I don't know if I just missed it before, if it was there before, but I don't think it was. And I noticed it for the first time, and I think it's great. It wasn't there? All right, good. I was like, I don't think I saw it.
No, it was there. It was there. Maybe we worded it a little bit better, but either way, we appreciate the compliment. So we'll take it. The feedback was good.
That was it. So that looks good. So thank you for that.
All right, thank you. Vice President Sutter.
I went to a whole lot of meetings. It was a busy month, but the one that I enjoyed the most was this past Friday. We had the WHALE conference. It was just one day this time, the Water Education for Latino Leaders, and I will send it out to you guys if you want it. It's the top 10 tips for effective advocacy. But the theme this year was really good. It was on climate change, political climate change, and that's impacting California water and our water infrastructure, and dealing with smart growth and water scarcity, groundwater policies, our water planning, but really dealing on the political end. So it was really good. When I get the link, I'll send you the link if you want to attend if you want to look at some of the videos that were recorded. But the biggest session that was good was on preparing the infrastructure for the next 100 years, and then some of the politics behind that and what we can be doing to get our water and wastewater infrastructure ready for that. And then there was something about a community resiliency fund and how do we create advisory boards in our districts. So there's something that I know we've talked about before on how we can get the community more engaged in what we do. And advisory boards, I know that Director Weiner brought these up earlier last year, sometime about more than a year ago. So I think that's something we need to revisit. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. I have nothing to report at all, so let's move on to the next item.
Thank you. Next item is good of the order, 8B.
Okay, let's start off with Director Cepeda.
Nothing on that. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Weiner. Director Weiner, I believe you're muted.
Pushing the button.
Yeah, there you go.
No, I have nothing on that item.
All right, thank you. Director Stanley?
Nothing, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Vice President Sutter?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, thank you as well. I have nothing there as well. Next item, please.
Thank you. The next item is future agenda items, 8C.
Okay, let's start off with Director Stanley.
I have 3 items, please. The first, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay, the first item is I'm waiting for the PLA. When is it expected? And then I have a follow-up to this.
Anyone
So
answer
we-
the question?
Yeah, so it's not really on the agenda to talk about the PLA, so we can't really talk about it. I could tell you it's in the works, but short
Well,
of that, it's
I
not
don't
really
want.
on the agenda.
I didn't want to talk about it, Lisa. I just wanted to know if it was expected sometime in the future.
Yes, it is.
Okay, so I would like to have the PLA a future agenda item. And when it's presented, I would like to see what the unions, the Labor Council sent us, and then whatever it is that is the state that it's in, and so that I can understand why it's taking so long. That's my first request. My second request.
Are you making a motion to add that?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we need to take these one at a time, correct, Claire? She's nodding yes.
Yes, but I'm not sure what the requested agenda item is because I understand that there's a request to see different drafts of the document, but I don't think that that's an agenda item.
My request is I would like to have a presentation that includes the original document that was sent to our district to start the negotiations to achieve a PLA that this entire board voted to support. And I would like to see where we're at right now and get a report as to how much longer it's going to take.
So, Claire, or I'm sorry, before you go on, I'm not really sure this requires a future agenda item specifically. I mean, we will be bringing this item forward to the board shortly. We will have a recommendation and we can certainly include the original document in that presentation. I mean, I'm not sure that it requires necessarily it being put on a future. I don't know that you need a formal process at this point. That's exactly what is already planned.
I'm fine.
I can also, I'm sorry.
I'm fine if it's going to come before this board again, hopefully, so that we can wrap this up. I've been asking about this, and I don't. If it's already going to come before us, then it doesn't have to be a future agenda item. The reason why I'm making the motion is because I'm becoming frustrated that it's taking so long.
So I would just suggest that I understand you're at this point in the agenda, but you can always email me and I can provide that information. I think we have provided a couple of updates previously that it will be coming forward, but as opposed to going through this process for something like that, that's the other option. I just wanted to remind the board that you can always do that.
Hey, Claire, I saw your hand up.
If I may I make a comment, which is that we are bringing the draft agreement to a special meeting of the Planning Committee on the 30th. So we have been in discussions of this month. So we have been in discussions with the union, and there are a variety of legitimate reasons why this has taken some time. And so I would ask that our discussions with respect to the negotiations potentially be conducted not in a board meeting. We can talk about that later, but we will intend to brief the Planning Committee on the 30th in connection with the current state of the negotiations. And then after the Planning Committee has worked through it, then it will be put on the board agenda. And our goal right now, I can at least say, is to bring it in December. And I apologize if I'm overstepping my bounds, but that is an update that may help solve for some of this.
No, that's perfect. That's all I really wanted to know. So I don't need to make a motion on this particular item. Are we ready for me to move on to my second item?
Please.
I would like, I believe that I have been unclear. So I'm trying to become clearer. When I have requested in the past that some sort of accounting be made of what the general manager's spending authority has obligated the district, I don't think I've been clear. So I'm going to try to be clear now. When we have our monthly check register, I would like a section that has general managers, her use of her spending authority, and every single contract that she has obligated the district to, and monthly have it updated to include the new ones, so that the new contracts and the new amounts, so that on a month-to-month basis, it's possible for the public to see, okay, this is what the general manager is, it was pretty timely that Claire was talking about basically transparency and sunshine laws. And, what I would like to feel that I'm doing as a director is that I am paying attention to where all the monies go, and it's always been kind of a mystery. And it's not just the current GM; it's been other GMs as to what are they spending money on. And so, I, as a ratepayer and as a board member, would like to know what our current GM is spending money on. And I think that the public is entitled to be able to clearly see what it is that our general manager is doing, just so that if anyone has questions, they can see that we're providing answers to them. So I would like that to be part of the new format to our addition to the monthly reports. And so do we need to discuss it, Claire, or how does this work? Do I make a motion that this be discussed as an action item?
I believe the agenda sets forth that you can request to have a specific item placed on a future agenda. So if you want to make a motion at this time to place an item on a future agenda to discuss and I'm sorry, I'm closing my eyes because I want to make sure I try to capture what you're saying as the best I can, to provide greater detail with respect to contracts entered into by the general manager in the prior month, and I think a tally of expenditures made under the general manager's authority that can be agendized for, whether or not that should be a recurring item on the agenda.
May I?
Yes.
May I please?
Yes.
Can I help Ms. Director Stanley out, please?
Sure.
Because we just spoke about these at the planning committee. Director Zepeda, we just we had a long discussion about these at our planning committee meeting, and Sir Justin is quite clear on the kind of report, and this was included in that report because we discussed this part of some of the reporting that he's working on. So, Director Stanley, I'm going to beg your indulgence in a little bit of patience because it's something that we are working on in the planning committee with staff, and maybe Justin can explain it a little better, but it's something that I did talk to him about. It's called a contract spend report, and
I am content.
And it's very similar to what you're asking for, but it ties in to the spending authority and it's something that is being reported, but maybe not in the detail that we already spoke because Director Zepeda brought it up and I brought it up in our planning committee meeting, and it may be in the minutes of that meeting. So I'm hesitant to say we need to bring it up again at these board meetings before we finish flushing it out at the planning committee level.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Ms. Sutter. Vice President, I appreciate that. What I'm trying to, I just want a section as part of the check register to say this is what the general manager is. This is her contracts that she signed, and have a month-to-month accounting of that. So if you can do that, I'd appreciate it. If you're already working on it, I'll leave. Huh?
Any other items?
And then my last one is when this board voted to hire Claire and her firm and awarded her the contract to be our general counsel, I expected her to take over all the legal work, and to hear that we still have Burke Sorensen doing some work, and I don't care what you call it. I guess I want to revisit that and have a discussion about that. So I want to make a motion that we revisit.
Well, let me comment. I'm sorry. May I just interrupt for one moment? I'm sorry, Director Stanley. I have taken over all of the Burke Williams material so far, and Liebert Cassidy Whitmore is still providing labor counsel service. As the general manager mentioned earlier, they were working on policies. That's on hold with Burke Williams for right now. And if there are items in the check register, it's for services that have already been rendered. We did take that back over when I assumed the position of general counsel. And so anything that is left is residual. I have not had a chance to talk to the general manager about our next steps on the policies, but I would like to assure the director that my firm has taken over virtually all of the non-labor related items at the district. if that's helpful.
Yes, it is, because, you know, as a director, if I have a question about something that has been worked on by somebody else, I like to know that I'm talking to the person who did the work. So thank you for that clarification. So I guess I have no motions as it's all being taken care of. So thank you so much.
Director Cepeda, I saw your hand up.
I was just going to make a point of clarification because we're getting into the weeds of conversation, and they got to be motions. Otherwise, we're talking about the actual items in all these three, so we're actually out of compliance. So, but it sounds like we're done with that there. So, just want to put that out there.
Do you have
We can't be talking about the items.
any items?
I do.
Okay.
And my motion, under the future agenda items, my motion is to bring the PLA up for a vote on the December 2nd meeting. And I know that we've already discussed it. I know that's going to come up on our agenda on the 30th, but I want to give us a deadline. Now, the board does not need to vote on it, but as long as the vote does not pass December, I just want to give us a timeline and a deadline. And I'm putting it out on December 2nd, but no later than December 16th. For the board to be able to vote on the PLA. So that's my motion on the floor.
All right, so there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, the item's been moved and seconded. Brenda, please take the roll.
Thank you. President Alvarado?
Yes.
Vice President Sedes?
Yes.
Thank you. Director Weiner?
Yes.
Director Stanley?
Yes.
And Director Cepeda?
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay, Director Cepeda, is that it?
Thank you. Yes, that is it, Mr. President. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Weiner.
Yes, I'd like to have an item that talks about the ceremonial passing of the gavel, or ceremonies regarding new members, re-elected members, and have them be part of the board's standard operating procedures. I'd like to talk about those, what they could look like, what they are.
Okay, Claire, how would that be worded?
We can have an agenda item for the process of, if I'm correct here, we're talking about the oath-taking ceremony and the election of officers?
Yes, and other ceremonies that we might want to implement for annual changes or board members receiving special awards or things like that. I would like to, we did have, when I first started, we had we had ceremonies that were part of our transition, part of new members coming on board. We did have those ceremonies, and the ceremonies resided with the board secretary. And so I'd like to revisit those and come up with some ceremonies.
So maybe I think a motion that says item to discuss Board of Directors ceremonial exchanges or ceremonial.
Let's call it, yeah, ceremonial recognition.
Okay.
And it could be a general item, and perhaps the director can talk with the general manager about the outlines of that after this meeting if it's approved.
I have ideas, but I'd definitely like the board to weigh in on it so that the ceremonies are, meaningful and nice. So, but
would you accept that motion, Harry?
Pardon me? I'm saying I like the language. Yes.
Okay. All right. So Harry just made that motion. Director Weiner, I apologize. Can I get a second, please?
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay, the item's been seconded, I believe, twice, but that's okay. Please take the roll.
Thank you. President Alvarado?
Yes.
Vice President Sedes?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Director Weiner?
Yes.
Director Stanley?
Yes.
And Director Cepeda?
Yes.
Thank you. The motion passes 5-0.
Okay, is that it, Director Weiner? Thank you, sir.
That's all I have.
Okay. Vice President Sutter, anything?
I just want us to revisit the idea about community advisory boards.
So would you like to make that motion?
Yes, I move that we consider the creation of community advisory boards in each of the wards of the district.
The districts, okay. Perfect. All right, do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
All right, item's been moved and seconded. Brenda, please take the roll.
Thank you, President Alvarado.
Yes.
Vice President Sutter.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Director Weiner.
Yes.
Director Stanley.
Yes.
And Director Cepeda.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion passes 5-0.
Okay. Vice President Sutter, are you complete? All set?
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. I have nothing for future agenda items, but I did want to congratulate Harry and Sherry, our directors Weiner and Stanley, on their reelection. And
I will join you in that. Yes.
congratulate Cesar in his election officially
Yay.
to the board. So welcome officially as a board member, even though you were before, but you were elected this time.
Yes.
You had nobody to run against you, which was good. But that was great. So
They were scared. They were scared.
yeah, they were scared of you. So I look forward to continuing to work together in a cohesive manner. And
Yes.
I guess having said that, I'm going to call this meeting to an end and adjourn. And we'll see you all at our next meeting.
Yes. Good night, everybody.
Stay safe. Stay
And-
safe. Wear a mask.
Yes. And thank you, Director Weiner, for winning yours.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, I believe yours was not a win, Harry. That's called a landslide.
No. It's who he had to go against.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
My replacement would not have been, well, the board wouldn't